What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today's video is going to be a lot less scripted than normal, if there's going to be any script at all. I'm just kind of turning on the camera and just sort of talking, so we'll see what happens. But there's been something that's on my mind the past couple of days that I've really been thinking about, and something yesterday kind of spurred this into a much bigger thought process that I kind of want to explain. So earlier this week, as of this video's release, the Ghost Ship crew and a lot of other game developers out there participated in something known as the Spill. Now, if you have no idea what it was, I didn't know what it was until about a week ago, but basically it is a first of its kind sort of event that Coffee Stain Studios put together, where basically they got together with a lot of other indie dev studios to talk about basically the state of their games, answer some chat Q&A questions, as well as do some other fun little stuff, and essentially just talk about what it means to be in an indie development type state, be in an early access type state, and a lot of other kind of stuff. It's all on the Coffee Stain Studios webpage on YouTube if you want to check it out for yourself, because it was a lot of fun and they had some cool stuff. They had some competitions, they had some chat voting stuff. It was very interesting, and I'd never really seen anything like it before. And I got some really interesting insight as to what it basically meant to be a game developer, especially an indie game developer, as there's so much stuff that goes into it, and there's a lot of things that really do come with being a developer, especially on a small scale like this. Since again, these are not like AAA game development studios. These are people who have significantly smaller budgets and team sizes, and yet they're still able to put out some really interesting products. And as I was watching it, I was doing a watch party stream, and in chat, we were talking about a lot of the stuff that was going on. Yes, we were a little bit disappointed that DeepRock didn't announce anything new involving Rogue Core or anything, but it was still really cool to watch. But towards the end of the stream, we started to kind of get into this little discussion in chat talking about the way that indie development has really risen above and exploded in popularity over the past couple of years, and how some of the indie development studios that are out there are doing way better than some of the big budget AAA studios that exist, which is interesting. And some people might be a little bit afraid of this. Some people might not necessarily see this as a good thing. So it's kind of been this thought process I've had for a little while as to what exactly is it that makes indie games significantly more appealing to a lot of people compared to AAA games. Now, first off, I want to make it very clear that I'm not saying that AAA games equal bad, that AAA game studios equal bad games. I'm not saying that in the slightest. Some of my favorite games are from AAA studios. Recently, one of the games that I have not been able to put down is God of War Ragnarok, made by Sony, one of the biggest AAA studios that are out there. And I've said before several times on the channel, I'm a very big Destiny fan, so that's obviously a big AAA game. Hell, one of the most anticipated games that I cannot wait for to come out for next year is Monster Hunter Wilds, made by Capcom, one of the biggest AAA studios that exists. So I'm not trying to say that AAA game studios are all bad or they only make bad games, but what exactly is it that is making AAA game studios sort of drop the ball in a lot of ways compared to what some of these indie game devs are doing? Because you see what these people are talking about in the games that they're making and the projects that they have, and it's not like they're doing anything ridiculously crazy. They're kind of just building off of things that have already existed in the gaming industry so far. So what exactly is it about it that is drawing people more towards indie games than AAA studios? I know a lot of people are probably going to immediately jump on the wagon of it's just corporatized greed, and a lot of the AAA studios are just worried about the bottom line being cash and just making a profit. And while yes, in some cases that definitely is true, I think it goes a little bit deeper than just overall profit margins. I think there's a lot of factors that really can tie into this, but I think the bottom line, and I think the biggest thing that really separates these indie games and indie game devs from some of the big AAA corporate devs, is just the soul of the game, or rather the lack thereof in some cases. You look at some of these AAA game studios that are putting out products, that are making titles, and you look at them and you just think to themselves, what exactly is this? What type of game am I looking at? Or they're making something that they just don't genuinely think is going to be good, or they're just making it just because they want to capitalize on something that is already popular. To use, I guess, a pretty topical and appropriate example, I will use the case of Concord. I highly doubt I need to explain what exactly happened to Concord, or at least what the story is surrounding Concord, but in case you somehow do not know anything about it at this point, or if you're somebody who stays away from that particular part of the gaming scene, Concord was basically going to be Sony's attempt at a hero competitive shooter similar to things like Overwatch. It was going to be basically their take on it, and it was in development for I think like 8 or some years, and it cost a ridiculous amount of money, and it flopped, I think, within the first 2 weeks of it coming out. It was a big monumental loss to Sony, and a lot of people were not really surprised when it did flop because they could kind of tell that it wasn't going to succeed. But how exactly were they able to tell that it wasn't going to succeed? Because if you look at the game itself, if you look at the gameplay, from a technical and at least polished standpoint, like, yeah, it looks like it works perfectly fine. It is a AAA studio, so it functions, it works. The gameplay seems smooth, the graphics are really nice. Like, from a technical under the hood standpoint, it is a well-polished game. So what exactly was about it that didn't work? Well, the biggest factor was it really had no soul to it whatsoever. It was trying to be something that already existed. It was trying to be Overwatch, but just in a different way. The character designs were uninspired. Not to get too into it because this isn't necessarily the video for that, but they tried to get a little bit too inclusive with the types of characters that they were making, which just made them overall relatively unappealing, and people did not necessarily like that. So the game really didn't have any sort of charm or soul to it. And that, I think, is the defining line that separates these good indie titles from these manufactured corporate titles, if that makes any sort of sense. And again, I'm not trying to point shade or say that all AAA studios are terrible or that they all make only bad games. You can definitely find some that are out there, but you just have to be a lot more careful about what you're looking at. But I think what's more important is that indie game developers have significantly more passion and soul in the projects that they make. Whereas if you're talking about a AAA game development studio, they have an infinite amount of budget and they're basically just going to try to look for something that is going to be successful, get their name out there. Yes, obviously profit is important, which it is true to also indie game devs, but is a little bit more important to these big AAA studios, especially since the higher ups are the people who actually are saying that this game needs to be made or are trying to say it needs to include X, Y, and Z, probably don't play too many video games, or at least don't understand what players actually want to see out of video games. So not to say that they're a little bit disconnected, but they are a little bit disconnected. But you look at something like, for example, Lethal Company, which I'm not a huge fan of Lethal Company just because I'm a big baby, but if you look at Lethal Company, it was made by a single person, I believe, and it has a ridiculously high rating, and it was at one point in time, like, I think one of the most streamed titles on Twitch and YouTube, and it just exploded in popularity when the game looks like it was made in like 2004. And that's because the game has significantly more soul and charm to it. It has kind of its own sort of style. It's not trying to necessarily be something that already exists. It's trying to be its own thing, and it's doing a unique spin on it. It has such a unique sort of charming atmosphere surrounding it, and that's what makes it step apart from the rest. And that brings us full circle as to why, for example, DeepRockGalactic is as popular and as prominent in its community as it really is. DeepRock isn't necessarily doing anything ridiculously game-changing in the PvE co-op genre. It's not really doing anything really wild to change up the meta. It plays very similarly to a lot of PvE cooperative games, but it has so much charm and soul and passion put into it, and it has such a unique sort of design to it that's what makes people want to play it and what makes people really enjoy it. And that is the big difference. If Deep Rock had a much different sort of skin on it, I guess is the best way to describe it, but if it did not have the kind of charm or soul or amount of passion put into it, it would be a much different experience for a lot of people. I know a lot of people like to compare Helldivers to DeepRockGalactic, and I am a big fan of both games, and I don't think you necessarily need to pick one or the other, but for some people, they think they have to. And a big comparison between the two is Helldivers, for the people who don't like it, they seem to think it's a little bit too basic just because you're playing as just normal dudes, normal military guys, and you're fighting for Earth or whatever the case may be. They basically just compare it to like Starship Troopers, which is a fair comparison, I suppose, but I still think it has a good amount of charm in itself in its own way, but that's a whole topic for a different video. But it does bring up a pretty decent point that if DeepRockGalactic did not have the charm or passion or motif that it does have, it wouldn't be nearly as popular, or people would not like it nearly as much. And that, I think, is what these indie game developers have really captured in the things that they make, is that they want to make things unique. Going back to the spill, talking about what was on there, you had the devs of Valheim, which is probably one of my favorite survival crafting games that's out there on the market right now. Satisfactory, which after watching this, I really want to play Satisfactory now because I've never played it before, as well as a bunch of other titles that just either are not out yet or are just getting closer to their 1.0 releases, or some just recently got announced on the spill. But no matter which one it was, you can tell that the people who are making it really enjoy the stuff that they make, just in the way that they talk about it. It's crazy. I mean, one of the games that kind of took me off guard was, I can't remember the name of it, you'll see it on screen, but it's basically a team PvP game where you play as people in a neighborhood and you're basically trying to trash somebody's house because they're a bad neighbor and you don't like them and the other team has to defend the house. And it's basically Home Alone the game, and I was not expecting it, and it looks so much fun because it just has an insane amount of charm to it. It's such a unique experience, it's such a unique idea that if you had given me 40 guesses, I would not have gotten that. And it just shows that, at least in my opinion, and I think a lot of other people's opinions, and what AAA game studios are starting to realize is soul trumps investors. That's basically the bottom line of this entire thing. If you make something that has passion, if you make something that you genuinely want to succeed, if you have a drive to make something that is unique and that sets itself apart from anything else, that is 1,000 times more valuable than an infinite budget or a 1,000-person team, because that is going to take you so much farther. I like to use the analogy of burgers because I'm a burger fan a lot, and it's kind of like the equivalent of if you're going to get a burger from McDonald's, which is a chain that standardizes everything and basically just focuses on being as efficient as possible, versus getting a burger from your local family restaurant that prioritizes and focuses on burgers and does it in a different way, you're going to get a vastly different experience between the two. And that, I think, is kind of the same premise when it comes to indie games versus AAA games. Not to say that the burger from McDonald's is not bad, or getting a burger from McDonald's is not bad every now and then, because sometimes you just want a Big Mac, or sometimes you just want a Quarter Pounder. Video is not sponsored by McDonald's, by the way. I feel like I should say that. And that's, again, not to say that AAA game studios are inherently bad. I do think people need to be a little bit more cautious when they look at AAA studios, especially publishing studios. But I think that what they need to do more than anything else is just realize that players want to see more soul and passion put back into the titles that they get. You know, there have been so many titles that I have played from my childhood, and probably some that other people have had, where it just is not the same as it was before. I don't know exactly what examples I can bring off the top of my head, but I know one thing is Halo, for example, in my opinion, is just not quite the same as what I remember it growing up. Even though I didn't really play Halo when I was a kid, I didn't play it until like high school, but that's a whole separate story. But the point is that a lot of people really want gaming to get back to the point that it was at before, where there was just so much more passion, so much more love, and so much more soul in the titles that are put out there. And that's why these kinds of indie game developers and these indie game titles can get the kind of backing and the kind of attention that they deserve, because they are putting the soul and passion into it. Yes, of course, these developers also care about making profit and at the bottom line, bringing in money, because that's how they live. That's not something that is necessarily debatable, but it is not their sole purpose for making the things that they make. They want to make titles because they are good. They want to make titles because it's something that they've wanted to put together, which is a phenomenal thing. And that is significantly more valuable than Sony or Microsoft or whatever big AAA company that's out there pushing out a title because they think it's going to be able to compete with such and such other title that is taking a lot of their attention away. People want games that they know that they can enjoy playing. People want games that they know fills a specific role in their enjoyment that just nothing else can really hit, because more and more people are playing games these days, and it's becoming much more of a standardized medium of entertainment, and people are becoming much more aware of what they are investing in because it's a big thing. People don't necessarily want to spend $70 for something that they're not 100% sure if they're going to love. I've been rambling for a while now, and I don't even know if really anything I've been talking about has made a lot of sense, but I really just wanted to express my thoughts about what the spill was, because it was really, really cool. And if you have not checked it out yourself, check out the VOD. They have it on their channel, on the Coffee Stain Studios channel, and check it out for yourself if you want, because there was a lot of really cool stuff there. And then I also just wanted to, just express my thoughts and views about this particular concept, because I feel like a lot of people have different views that they have regarding this. Some might be the same as mine, some might not, and that's totally fine. And depending on how you guys feel about this, let me know down in the comments. I think that people are ready for games to start getting back to a point where there's more passion and soul put into it than analytics and just trying to basically check off a bunch of boxes and make sure that they can make something that's efficient. People don't necessarily want efficiency. People want something that is fun, because at the end of the day, that's why we play games in the first place. And I think the sooner the big AAA studios start to realize that, the sooner we can get back to the golden era of video games that we had in the past, that we unfortunately have not been in for a very long time. And again, I'm not trying to flay AAA studios. There's definitely some good ones out there. There's some good titles from AAA studios out there. You just got to be a little bit more careful and sort of weed through everything before you can find the ones that you want to play or the ones that are worth your time playing. Because at the end of the day, it's all about enjoyment, and that's what these games are for. Well, that was my ramble about the state of indie games versus AAA studios. Sorry, this was a little bit out of left field. It's just something that's been on my mind for a little while, and I've kind of wanted to talk about it, and watching the spill really helped me sort of bring it all into perspective. But how do you guys feel about all of this? Am I talking out of my ass, or do you guys feel similarly, differently? Am I completely wrong? Am I sort of on the right track? Let me know down in the comments, because I feel like this is a topic that a lot of people have thoughts about in the gaming industry that nobody really knows how to put into words, or put into words that are appropriate for people to hear. And let me know, have you boycotted AAA studios entirely, or are you just very hesitant, or do you just not care and you just still get them regardless? Let me know how you guys feel in the comments. Me personally, I'm still fine with AAA studios so long as it's a game that I can vibe with and that the studio itself aligns with my values and, at least to me, respects their viewer base, because that's kind of the biggest and most important thing. But you might be different, and I want to hear what you guys have to say. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video informative and just a little bit entertaining. If you did, please sure to hit that like button, as it really shows me what types of videos you guys like to see. And consider becoming a member and subscribing today, as it really helps out the channel a lot. Rocket Stone Miners, I will see you in the next video.